I'm Sarah. What's wrong?
I'm Sarah from the airport's therapy dog program. This dog's name is Buddy.
Airport dog comforted crying veteran owner learned he trained military dogs. When therapy dog Buddy broke protocol to comfort a stranger, Sarah never expected to discover the man facing court-martial for training decisions that killed his own student. Denver International Airport's Terminal A buzzed with Friday evening chaos as delayed flights created bottlenecks of frustrated travelers. Sarah Chen guided her golden retriever through crowds of stranded passengers, many facing overnight delays due to severe thunderstorms. Lightning illuminated the terminal's massive windows, while thunder shook the building, adding natural drama to an already tense atmosphere where stress levels peaked with every canceled departure announcement. At 29, Sarah had worked as a certified therapy dog handler for 3 years, but tonight felt different. Her own PTSD, triggered by her Air Force deployment in Syria, had been acting up all week. The anniversary of her squad's IED attack was approaching, and the storm outside reminded her too much of incoming mortars. Buddy, her golden retriever partner, had been unusually protective today, sensing her emotional fragility. Their therapy work usually helped Sarah maintain stability, but serving other veterans while battling her own demons required constant vigilance. She'd almost called in sick tonight, but desperate travelers needed Buddy's comfort during the weather delays. Sarah's medication was wearing off early again, and she could feel the familiar anxiety building. She needed to complete their patrol and get home before her symptoms worsened. Tonight was supposed to be routine help a few stressed travelers, then retreat to safety. Near gate A23, Buddy suddenly broke from his trained heel position and bolted toward a man sitting alone, head in hands, shoulders shaking. Sarah had never seen Buddy abandon protocol like this. Something about this stranger triggered protective instincts she'd never witnessed. The man looked up as Buddy approached, revealing a face etched with devastation that went beyond normal travel delays. "Sir, I'm sorry, he's never done this before," Sarah called out, rushing after Buddy, who had positioned himself directly against the stranger's legs. "I'm Sarah. This is Buddy, our therapy dog. He seems to think you need him." The man looked up with bloodshot eyes. "James Patterson, and your dog's right, I do need help." His voice carried the hollow tone of someone past caring about appearances. Sarah noticed James's military bearing despite his obvious distress, the way he automatically straightened when addressing her despite his emotional state. "Are you traveling for duty?" "Court-martial," James said flatly. "Flying to Lackland Air Force Base tomorrow morning. Last trip I'll ever make in uniform." The word court-martial hit Sarah like ice water. Military justice proceedings meant serious charges, criminal accusations that could destroy careers and lives. Whatever brought James to this moment went far beyond ordinary military discipline. "That sounds serious," Sarah said carefully, settling beside him as Buddy maintained protective contact. Sarah's training taught her to provide comfort without prying, but James's mention of Lackland triggered specific memories. Her own PTSD treatment had involved therapy dogs trained at military facilities, and Lackland was the premier military working dog training center. "Are you connected to the dog program at Lackland?" Sarah asked, noting James's immediate recognition when Buddy had approached him. "Was," James replied bitterly. 30 years training military working dogs, until I made decisions that got people killed." The admission hung heavy between them. Sarah realized She was dealing with someone facing not just career destruction, but criminal liability for training decisions that had resulted in deaths. The weight of command responsibility in military service meant James could be held legally accountable for outcomes beyond his direct control. Flight 1247 to San Antonio, boarding will be delayed until 8 a.m. due to weather conditions, the gate agent announced. Passengers may deplane and seek overnight accommodations. James's flight had been postponed 12 hours. Whatever he was trying to outrun would have to wait until morning. Over the next hour, James revealed fragments of his crisis. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, his former student, had died in Afghanistan working with a military dog James had trained. The Army's investigation concluded that James's training protocols were inadequate, that Maria died due to systematic failures in preparation James had supervised. She was 22, James said, tears flowing freely. I trained her and Rex, the dog she died working with. The investigating board says my methods were outdated, that I failed to prepare them for modern threats. Sarah felt familiar PTSD symptoms building as James described combat deaths, but she fought to maintain professional composure. What exactly are the charges? Dereliction of duty, negligent homicide, 30 counts, one for every handler who died working with dogs I trained over the past 5 years. James's voice broke completely. They're saying I killed 30 soldiers through incompetent training. Sarah realized she was the only thing standing between James and a complete breakdown, but her own trauma was threatening to overwhelm her ability to help. 7:30 p.m. Sarah's PTSD symptoms intensified as James described combat scenarios that mirrored her own deployment trauma. Her hands began shaking as memories of her squad's IED attack, the same type that killed Maria Santos, flooded back with devastating clarity. But Buddy's behavior puzzled her. Instead of providing his usual general comfort, Buddy showed specific recognition patterns around James' alert postures, focused attention, and protective positioning that suggested familiarity beyond their brief meeting. James, Buddy's acting like he knows you specifically. Have you worked with golden retrievers in military training? James studied Buddy with professional interest. Thousands of dogs over 30 years, but this one? He paused, examining Buddy's posture and responses. Good bone structure, excellent temperament for therapy work. Where did you get him? Military breeding program, but he washed out of combat training in 2019. Too empathetic for patrol work. James went completely still. What breeding program? What year exactly? Lackland Air Force Base, K9 Candidate 4471, born March 2019. Jesus Christ, James whispered, staring at Buddy with recognition dawning. 4471. I remember this dog specifically. Airport security noticed their extended emotional conversation and approached with concern. Everything okay here? Sir, you seem distressed. Sarah quickly explained their therapy dog program, but the security officer remained suspicious of James's obvious breakdown. Sir, are you experiencing thoughts of self-harm? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. James's hesitation provided the answer. He was indeed contemplating suicide before his court-martial, seeing it as preferable to facing criminal prosecution for deaths he felt responsible for. I need to call this in, the security officer said, reaching for his radio. Wait, Sarah interrupted. Give us a few minutes. I'm a certified mental health first aid responder. The officer reluctantly agreed to monitor from a distance, but Sarah realized she now had official oversight and time pressure. If James showed signs of immediate danger, Airport security would intervene with protocols that could escalate his crisis. Sarah's own trauma symptoms were worsening, but she forced herself to focus on the connection between James and Buddy. "James, you said you remember him specifically. What happened to K9 Candidate 4471? "I made the decision to wash him out of combat training," James replied, his voice barely audible. His temperament evaluation showed he was too empathetic, too gentle for patrol work. "I recommended him for therapy service instead of combat deployment." Sarah felt the weight of revelation crashing over her. "James, do you understand what that means? Your decision saved Buddy from combat service and allowed him to become a therapy dog. He's helped hundreds of veterans, dozens of PTSD cases." "Including you?" James asked, seeing something in Sarah's expression. Sarah nodded, feeling her own emotional walls crumbling. "Buddy saved my life after my deployment. I was suicidal, couldn't function. Working with him gave me purpose and healing." The irony was devastating. James faced prosecution for training decisions that allegedly caused deaths, while one of his decisions had indirectly saved Sarah's life. 8:45 p.m. Airport medical personnel arrived after security reported a potential suicide risk. EMTs approached with professional concern while James realized his crisis was becoming public. "Sir, we need to assess your mental state," the lead EMT announced. "Are you having thoughts of harming yourself?" James faced a critical decision: admit suicidal ideation and face involuntary psychiatric hold that would prevent his court-martial appearance, or deny it and lose credibility when his obvious distress suggested otherwise. Sarah watched James struggle with impossible choices while her own PTSD symptoms peaked. The stress of the situation, combined with anniversary trauma and James's combat stories, pushed her past her coping threshold. "I can't," Sarah gasped, recognizing the onset of a full panic attack. "James, I'm sorry. I can't help you anymore." As Sarah began hyperventilating, Buddy faced an unprecedented crisis. Both his handler and the stranger he'd recognized were simultaneously experiencing severe psychological distress, and he couldn't comfort both. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control, with multiple lives hanging in the balance. 9:15 p.m., Sarah's panic attack triggered airport emergency protocols. EMTs surrounded her while she hyperventilated, unable to communicate coherently as PTSD flashbacks overwhelmed her consciousness. Buddy, torn between Sarah's medical crisis and James's emotional breakdown, began showing signs of severe stress himself. James watched helplessly as the woman who'd been trying to save him collapsed into trauma-induced psychological emergency. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him: another person harmed by connection to his failed career, another life damaged by his presence. "Sir, step back," EMTs ordered James as they worked on Sarah. "Are you family?" "No, I'm nobody," James replied, the words carrying deeper truth than medical personnel could understand. Airport security had called federal authorities due to James's court-martial status and suicide risk. FBI agents were en route to ensure a military defendant facing federal charges didn't become a flight risk or public safety threat. As Sarah was loaded onto a gurney for transport to Denver General's psychiatric emergency department, Buddy refused to leave James's side despite emergency protocols requiring him to accompany his handler. The therapy dog was making an unprecedented choice, staying with the stranger rather than following his partner to the hospital. 9:32 p.m. FBI Special Agent Martinez arrived to find James sitting alone with a therapy dog whose handler had just been hospitalized. "James Patterson, I'm here to ensure you make your court-martial appearance tomorrow. Are you a suicide risk?" James stared at Buddy, who maintained protective contact despite the chaos around them. "Agent Martinez, this dog was K9 Candidate 4471. I washed him out of combat training 4 years ago. Sir, I need you to answer my question about suicide risk." "That dog's handler just had a psychiatric emergency triggered by my story," James continued, tears streaming down his face. "She told me Buddy saved her life through therapy work. I made the decision that put him in therapy service instead of combat." Martinez studied the situation: military defendant, hospitalized civilian, therapy dog, refusing to leave the defendant's side. "Mr. Patterson, what are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that for 30 years, I made training decisions that determined whether dogs and handlers lived or died. Tomorrow, I face prosecution for 30 deaths allegedly caused by my training failures. But tonight, I discovered that one of my decisions saved lives instead of ending them." James looked directly at Martinez. "Am I suicidal? Yes, but I won't run from accountability." Martinez realized he was dealing with unprecedented complexity, a defendant who acknowledged suicide risk but refused to flee justice, whose crisis was intertwined with a civilian's medical emergency and a therapy dog's unprecedented behavioral response. "Mr. Patterson, we need to get you psychiatric evaluation while ensuring you make your court appearance." "Agent Martinez, can I ask one thing? The woman who was just hospitalized, Sarah Chen, she said Buddy saved her life through therapy work. If I don't survive this court-martial, will you make sure she knows that one decision I made actually helped someone?" Martinez studied James with professional assessment. This wasn't typical pre-trial defendant behavior. James wasn't seeking escape or sympathy. He was processing the moral complexity of a career where individual decisions carried life and death consequences he'd never fully understood. Buddy maintained steady contact with James, providing comfort that neither human could offer in this moment of institutional crisis. Sometimes, the most important witness to your character is the one who can't testify in court. 10:15 p.m., Denver General Hospital's Psychiatric Emergency Department confirmed Sarah was stable, but would require overnight observation. FBI agent Martinez arranged for James to receive crisis counseling while maintaining custody pending his morning flight to Lackland. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the crisis intervention specialist, evaluated James with Buddy still providing unprecedented emotional support. "Mr. Patterson, your connection to this therapy dog seems significant to your mental state. Can you explain that relationship?" James detailed the discovery that his training decision had saved Buddy from combat service, enabling the dog's transition to therapy work that had literally saved Sarah's life. "Doctor, I face prosecution for 30 deaths allegedly caused by my training. But tonight, I learned one decision created healing instead of harm." Torres recognized the therapeutic breakthrough occurring in real time as James processed both his failures and his positive impact. Dr. Torres contacted Denver General to speak with Sarah's treating physician about the connection between her patient and the federal defendant. "Doctor, James Patterson made a training decision 4 years ago that directly enabled Sarah Chen's therapeutic recovery. She needs to know this information for her own healing process." Sarah, sedated but conscious, listened via phone as Torres explained the impossible coincidence the man who'd triggered her PTSD episode was also responsible for the decision that had saved her life through Buddy's therapeutic service. "Is he okay?" Sarah asked weakly. "James was talking about suicide when my panic attack started." Torres looked at James, who was maintaining his composure through connection with Buddy. "He's processing some difficult realizations about his career impact." Martinez faced pressure from military authorities to transport James immediately to Lackland, regardless of his psychological state. "Agent Martinez, defendant, needs to be in custody pending court-martial proceedings. His mental health issues aren't relevant to federal prosecution." But Torres disagreed. "Agent Martinez, this man is experiencing breakthrough therapeutic processing that could be crucial to his psychological stability. Interrupting this could trigger complete breakdown." James overheard the debate about his fate. "Dr. Agent Martinez, I appreciate your concern, but I won't avoid accountability. I need to face those 30 families who lost loved ones due to my training failures." Buddy seemed to sense James's resolve, maintaining supportive contact, while James chose responsibility over self-preservation. The critical moment came when Sarah, despite her own hospitalization, insisted on video calling James directly. "James, I need you to understand something. You didn't just save Buddy from inappropriate military service, you created the path that saved dozens of veterans from suicide." Sarah's voice strengthened as she continued. "Every veteran Buddy has helped, every family reunion he's facilitated, every PTSD episode he's prevented, that exists because of your training decision. You measured his temperament correctly and redirected him to service that matched his capabilities." James listened with growing comprehension that his career couldn't be measured only by failures, but by the complete impact of his professional judgments across thousands of animals and handlers over 3 decades. "Sarah, those 30 soldiers still died because of my inadequate training," James said quietly. "And hundreds of others survived because of your competent training," Sarah replied firmly. "James, you're going to face accountability for your failures. That's appropriate. But you also need to understand your successes, including the decision that saved my life." Martinez watched James process this perspective shift from total self-condemnation to balanced assessment of a complex career with both failures and achievements. "Agent Martinez, I'm ready to face my court-martial," James said with new resolve. "But I want Sarah to know that if I don't make it through this, Buddy represents the best decision I ever made." Dr. Torres cleared James for travel, recognizing that he'd found psychological stability through understanding the complete scope of his professional legacy. James pled guilty to negligent training charges, but received reduced sentencing due to character testimony from Sarah and documentation of his positive training decisions. Sarah recovered from her PTSD episode with new understanding of her healing journey's origin. Buddy returned to therapy work with enhanced training protocols James developed during his rehabilitation. Agent Martinez facilitated ongoing contact between James and Sarah, recognizing their mutual therapeutic benefit from processing shared connections to military service trauma. 2 years later, James completed his sentence and began working with veteran therapy dog organizations, using his expertise to train civilian dogs for PTSD support. Sarah testified at congressional hearings about military working dog training standards, advocating for systemic improvements while honoring both successes and failures in existing programs. They learned that accountability and recognition of positive impact could coexist, that taking responsibility for failures didn't require erasing evidence of lives saved and healing created through dedicated professional service. Sometimes facing your failures requires understanding your successes, and healing happens when accountability meets compassion.